Hi, this is Regina White Favors with Homeless Recovery Tips. And the topic is set standards, boundaries, and expectations. What we would call, use the acronym SBEs. This can be overstated enough, but it's definitely understated that we need to set standards, boundaries, and expectations. We have different contexts that we need to consider, of course, as academic, and I usually place everything under three major categories: academic, professional, and personal. So let me address that and then continue on. So if we're looking at academics, for example, we want to make sure that we set the right types of standards, boundaries, and expectations. That means that we are not cheating to skip ahead. We are doing the work that is required of us. We are setting the standard of excellence, actually learning the material, having an intrinsic motivation, which means you are learning for learning's sake versus extrinsic motivation, where you only care about the performance and you only care about the A that you get at the end, but you have no knowledge of what you just learned. The boundaries would be you are setting boundaries with friendships, relationships, family members, things like that, so that you can get your studies out academically. And then the expectations that you're actually going to finish the course, that you finish strong as well. Then, if you look at the professional, right, the professional would be you set standards that you meet the standards that are required for your field. That means if you are required to have a license in your field, like you want to become a nurse or a teacher or a lawyer, etc., then you need to make sure that you meet those standards. That means also not only the minimal standards that you need a degree and you need to take the study and take the licensing test, but you also meet the continuing education requirements. Boundaries would be always setting boundaries with family, friends, um, relationships, etc., so that you can perform well on your job. If you are always turned around emotionally from an existing relationship or family relationship or something like that, it's going to affect how you do your job, how you meet the standards, right? Then expectations that you have an expectation of yourself that you're going to perform the job well, be productive, contribute to your profession, because no company is hiring someone just to be a placeholder. They are hiring someone to be contributors to the brand. And so that you understand what the brand is, what you represent, who you are as a member of the brand, and then act accordingly. And then for the personal, I always place everything on a financial level because that's where I sort of struggled. So the set standards would be set standards financially, that you work for the money that you get, that you earn your money. You don't defraud, you don't steal money or anything like that. That's your standard of life that you believe in working, whether it is through work for a company or work through some form of entrepreneurship. And then boundaries always is boundaries with family, friends, relationships, etc. Because if you don't have your money right, or if you are allowing too many distractions, you're not going to have your money right, and then it might move you into criminal activity, which is always the case if something is going on with your money, right? And then if you don't set the right boundaries around your money, you don't have to have a criminal issue come before you. You could be evicted, you could have a foreclosure, you could have anything that is so life changing that it affects your finances, your credit score, etc., right? And then of course your ability to get a mortgage, your ability to get an apartment again, your ability to get a loan for a car, etc., right? And then expectations financially, where do you see yourself 5, 10, 15 years financially? We always use that sort of terminology, that statement, that question: where do we see ourselves 5, 10, 15 years, when we come to our careers and maybe our degree plans? But we don't set 5, 10, 15-year goals when it comes to financial expectations, and that's something that you want to think about. So now let's go to the homeless recovery aspect of this, because that's sort of like the baseline that we need to consider when we are setting standards, boundaries, and expectations in a sort of everyday living your life as 100% responsible adult individual. When you suffer through a homeless setback, however, a life setback that maybe leads to you becoming homeless, Your standards are going to change, your boundaries are going to change, your expectations are going to change because you are in a survivor mode. You're trying to survive setback versus overcome it. You are homeless. And as long as you don't have multi digit years of homelessness, you can tackle this issue much quicker, I guess, right? So then your standards, your boundaries and expectations will be predicated on where you're living. So if you're living with a family member, if you're living with a friend, if you're living with a boyfriend or girlfriend, if you're living with at the shelter, you have to abide by their standards, their boundaries, their expectations. You can't live in the shelter and think it's okay for you to bring your boyfriend over to visit you. They're not really supposed to come there to know that you're there in the first place, right? You can't expect the same can be said if you live with a friend. You can't expect your boyfriend to come there and live. You're sitting up here homeless on their couch, not really paying any rent, and then you expect the person who is the leaseholder to say it's okay to bring your boyfriend over there, who's also not going to be paying rent. So that one apartment leaseholder is the one who has to pay for you both. No, no, that's not right, right? So you have to abide by the standards, boundaries, and expectations of the place you're in until you can exit that homeless place into an apartment. So when I had to go and live with my mother for a short stint, it was I had to abide by her standards, her boundaries, and her expectations. I didn't bring people over because that wasn't my place. I already knew that. I didn't need a lecture on that. I didn't need a lesson on that. I didn't need wisdom and understanding about that. That is just obvious, right? But the standards were, of course, I always get a job. It was hard for me to get a job, so I had to go into freelance contracting, and that was still not bringing in the money to pay her enough for what I needed to do. And so there was friction, there was sort of hostility. And then the boundaries would be that she set boundaries in a sense that I had to go if I couldn't contribute. And so then I had to, and there's a whole narrative history on my relationship with my mother, whether I gave money to her or not, that has been sort of hostile, turmoil ridden, anxiety ridden, etc. So that's another video. But boundaries, that was the boundary that she set. And so then when I had to go into a shelter, they had their boundaries. I can only come in, I can only sign up for a certain time. I had to get up at 4 a.m. We ate breakfast, right? Cleaned our rooms, and then we had to exit by a certain time in the morning, and then we could not return again until I don't know about 3 or 4. So that was the boundaries for them. Then of course they set expectations of you living of you staying there, that you don't live here. This is an emergency shelter situation, and you are only allotted 30 days, right? And some shelters could be 30 days, some could be 3 months, 6 months, and then if you get on program, it can be up to 18 months, right? And there are expectations with that. So when you are always under someone else's authority and you're always on someone else's territory, their home, their place of residence, that's their territory. It doesn't matter if they are apartment leasing and that they have to pay rent. It doesn't matter. It's not your territory, and you can be asked to leave. So you are subject to their standards, their boundaries and expectations. It doesn't matter that you are a grown up. If you're going to push that narrative that you are a grown up, then you should not have to come and live with them. Period. That means a family member, that means a friendship, that means a boyfriend who wasn't expecting you to have to move in, that means a girlfriend who wasn't expecting you to have to move in. Okay, that means all of those people. If you are grown, then you should take care of yourself. You should make the decision to not move in with that person or with those people and take care of yourself. Otherwise, if you truly need help and you need a time frame for which you can use to get that help from them, then you need to come up under the authority of their standards, boundaries, and expectations. It doesn't matter if it's the shelter, it doesn't matter if it's your family house, your friendship house, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You are not on the mortgage deed, you are not on the mortgage, you are not on the apartment lease. You are not on any uh, uh, record of ownership that you can claim. Once you become a name on the lease, then you have rights. Then you can move in your boyfriend if you wanted to. He would have to contribute if he's going to stay there, because that wasn't the original agreement that you had with your friend. But it does depend on who got the apartment first, and then who put their name on the lease next, right? But these are ideas that you need to consider. You should not have to go and live with someone when you are an adult. I hate to say that because I had to go do it, and many people who have suffered through a natural disaster or a flooding or tornado or anything, a fire or things like that, they may have to go live with family. But I wonder too, if we had taken the 5 to 10 years that we were making money on a job and putting that money aside for emergency funding, and setting up a 2 to 3 year fund at least to pay the rent, would we still have to go and move with somebody? I would, if I had done that, I would have rather moved into a motel. That came much later, but I would have rather moved into a motel so I wouldn't have to burden people. Procrastination, that I picked up much earlier in my academic life, procrastination is really inconveniencing other people around you. It's inconveniencing the people around you. So if you don't get your financial house in order very early in life, then it's going to show up in your later life. And that's the worst time. That's why I say I wish I had done a lot better in my 20s. There was the opportunity, but I ignored it. And then when 30s came along, that's when my correction for some of the mistakes I did uh, in my 20s sort of took force. And then I hit the financial recession where I lost my job and had to go back and live with my mother, and that had its own issues or whatever. But had I planned much earlier, that's why if you don't do what you need to do in your 20s, I think you get your 40s, which gives you your mortality. You feel your mortality in your 40s. And so now you said, I got to get myself back together. I need to get this straight because I don't want to be here in this state of thinking, in this state of mind, in this financial setback in my 60s when I'm really going to need to have some money to live. Um, and so that's something that I want you to think about when you're setting standards, boundaries, and expectations, so that whatever standards, boundaries, and expectations you were expected to adhere to under someone else's authority and rule, you need to set for yourself when you get in your own place, because you have the right to. You have the right. So set standards. If you're going to recover from being homeless or homelessness, you're going to have a set of standards, something that you need to abide by. I need to keep a job. I need to work so I can keep a place, whether even if it's the motel for right now. I need to set boundaries. I can't volunteer my money. I can't volunteer my time because I'm trying to recover. I'm done. I don't want to live surviving setback the rest of my life. I need to overcome my setback. And then the expectations that you are going to win. You're going to accomplish this task by task, moment by moment, year by year. You're going to do it. And it requires you sitting down with a journal, pen and pad or whatever, and writing down what your standards, boundaries, and expectations are. So this is Homeless Recovery Tips. Set standards, boundaries, and expectations.